Does this look like you? Are you struggling to have gains while using suspension training? Is your form causing problems with your low back? A few simple changes may be the key to you using suspension training effectively and safely in your training plans in the future. By using suspension training bands during a push-up motion, we can vary the load by changing how much we are leaning. Using our low back and abdominal muscles to keep our body in one continuous straight line, we are able to run through a full push-up motion with more stabilizers activated. Potential problem to this one is the hips traveling ahead of that straight line. Another risk to watch out for is the arms twisting outward, which is not a potential risk on a traditional push-up. Using suspension training bands to do a chest press looks fairly similar to the push-up, but the widening of the hands activates the chest a bit more than the push-up. Potential problem with this one is the arms staying too straight and the elbows not tracking backwards. It'll be very difficult to come back. With most suspension training exercises, we can vary the load by changing how much we are leaning forwards. The angle of your body's lean will increase the weight. Potential problem with the chest press exercise is the hips traveling forwards and or the arms traveling too far up or down. Moving from an upper body push motion to an upper body pull motion with the suspension training row. Another exercise where we can vary the load by changing how much we are leaning. Seen here, I'm completely parallel to the ground and we are leaning as far as possible, maximum load. Demonstrating potential problems of the hips tracking not in line with the body and changing the angle of our arms. Potential row progression is using a single arm. With the single arm progression, there's new variables of your hips tracking side to side not in line or your upper body twisting to compensate for the single arm, as well as other adverse motions. Power pulls are a similar exercise to that single arm row, but with an added range of motion by reaching as far back and as far forward as possible during the exercise. Potential problem with this one is your feet twisting along with your upper body. Changing muscles in the arm. This is an overhead tricep extension. We will vary the load by how far you are leaning. Potential problems with this one is the elbows tracking too far out or the hands spacing far apart. Using the bands, we are able to have our center of mass behind our feet, increasing the leverage and adding load to a regular squat. Potential problems with this one, like all squats, are the hips tracking out of that center line or our knees moving in or out during that squat motion. Another exercise that we can add a little bit more difficulty and stabilizers is Bulgarian squats. Having your back foot in the suspension training band will make you use more stabilizers throughout the motion, as well as a little more range of motion. Bulgarian squats as well, the potential problem is hips twisting, upper body twisting to compensate for that single leg, or knees tracking in or out throughout the motion. A rollout is a fairly unique exercise to suspension training, maximizing range of motion and activation of our core muscles. Shoulders going to full extension and using our triceps and core to bring it back. Potential problem with this one is leaving your hips behind and decreasing the load and range of motion. Other potential problem with this one is your hips going ahead of the center line, tearing your body in half. This one being kneeling, you may want to use a mat. Hamstring curls done while suspension training will get us to use our stabilizers a bit more than regular hamstring curls. Potential problems with this one is the angle of the hips. If they are too far up, it will be difficult to get a full motion through the hamstrings. If they are too far down, it will greatly decrease the load on the muscles. Step side lunge is another one that we can make a little bit more difficult by using the bands to get our hips behind our feet. Potential problem with this one is not using the bands at all and just doing regular side steps. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what we're trying to do with the suspension training. These side plank hip raises are difficult to replicate without the raised band. Potential problem with this one is twisting of the hips facing forwards or backwards. Y flies running through a pretty broad range of motion in our shoulders and activating our back are difficult to replicate without the suspension training. Another one where the potential problem is the hips tracking too far back and or too far forwards at extension at the top. This is a good one to watch for symmetry within your clients. Potential problem with this one is asymmetric pulling of the arms, whether one is higher, one is lower, or they're going to different amounts of extension. Suspension training making it possible to step across our body like this, adding length to one side as well as strength to the other. A potential problem with this one is not using the bands very much, and it will be difficult to get that full extension. We are able to use the bands to get our hips behind our feet, increasing the load while adding a full range of motion to our lateral side. Potential problem with this one, like most side-to-side things so far, is the upper body twisting in either direction or stepping across our body the wrong way. Suspension training can be used to work up to a pistol squat for those who are working on that motion. Like all squat motions, potential problem with this one is the knees tracking away from the toes, either inwards or outwards, or a twist in the hips or upper body. Using the suspension bands for squat jumps, we are able to have our hips behind our feet, increasing the load due to leverage. Potential problem with this one is not doing that and just doing regular squat jumps. We are able to replicate a deadlift activation through this motion with the suspension training, tracking our hips back and using our hamstrings to pull ourselves back. Potential problem with this one is having our weight too far on our toes, or our upper body bending, or us using our arms. This plank V-up is another unique exercise to suspension training. Potential problems with this one is our knees bending and decreasing the amount of activation, or our legs becoming uneven throughout the motion. This adductor side plank will force us to use our adductors and our groin muscles as well as our obliques to keep our hips up. Potential problem with this one is relying on the obliques and moving the hips. Many neuromotor training activities are possible with suspension training, like this single leg running motion. Potential problems with this one is that free leg tracking out of a straight line, or our balanced leg shifting inwards or outwards during the motion. Suspension training also offers a variety of lengthening exercises like this Titanic one.
Nice. Now can you mess it up?